welcome to Topline Talks, a Mackie Myers podcast hosted by me, Owen Myers.
And me, Jenna Mackie.
As a multi-sector finance recruiter, our aim is to bring our listeners inspiring stories from exceptional finance and business leaders across a variety of different industries. In each episode, we'll discuss careers, industries, and talent experiences to help propel the next generation of finance leaders forwards. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on your media of choice. Today, we're really delighted to have Richard Meadows, who is the finance director for Brunning and Price, who are a 100-plus pub chain owned by the restaurant group. And we're delighted to have him with him. So, Richard, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Inspirational, that's a lot to live up to.
No pressure.
Strong words.
No pressure. Obviously, we've known each other for a while.
Yeah.
But for the sake of our listeners, can you give us a bit of an intro about who you are, what you do?
Sure. So, as you said, I'm the kind of head of finance for Brunning and Price pubs. So we have 79 pubs, getting to 100 pubs. And I'm kind of responsible for all areas of finance within that. We have got a team in London, that kind of shared service team that produce a lot of information for us. But then it's kind of responsible for the strategic direction of the business and the operational support for the operations team as well. And recently it's an interesting time because we've, as you said, part of the restaurant group, which is also owns Wagamama, more common than Brunning and Price in terms of what people would know. But we've recently been bought out by Apollo, so a big private equity house. So it's a lot of change at the moment.
Big change.
Yeah, big change. Exciting though.
Super exciting. Yeah, lots going on. Very different world.
And obviously like Brunning and Price, I think as a brand are probably more common in like the Northwest, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly.
There is a handful of pubs in London too.
No. So there's kind of 80 pubs, kind of half roughly in the north, half in the south. They're kind of known as a brand, as it were, in the north because it's the heartland. It's where the founders kind of founded the business, and so people do try to travel to other. They'll try and seek out new Brunning and Prices or find them. Whereas in the south, if you walked into one, you're less likely to know them as a brand. It's not like a Green King or a Wetherspoons. Type situation, but we've got kind of there's 5 in central London and then a few dotted around outside, but fair presence in the south too.
Probably fair to say you're like a lover of hospitality.
I think that's fair to say. Lover of pubs specifically.
Pubs specifically,
but hospitality as well.
Yeah. Did you work in hospitality like pre your finance career?
So when I was at uni, I had quite a few small jobs, and I did work in a hotel, kind of a bit front of house, a tiny bit behind the bar. But I wouldn't have massively said, I didn't do a huge amount. It was just a few shifts over summer type thing.
Where's the love of pubs come from?
That is a good question. I think I have to put that down. That's actually my father-in-law, because when it's definitely coming out of uni, obviously going to pubs at uni, but then settling into just every weekend is a dog walk, going to the pub, girls go off shopping, we just sit there all day. And that's very much kind of bedded into. Still, that's all I do at the weekends now. But it's very much a hobby as well as as a job. Yeah. So it works.
So, lover of hospitality, but obviously you went into a career in finance.
Yeah.
So why?
Good question. I ask myself that a lot. So it's a really funny one because when I was at uni, you start and I guess you don't have any idea what you really want to do. And I did a business degree, so it was really broad. And it was very much a kind of which areas am I interested in when everyone goes through that mad panic of I've got to get a job, start applying. And lots of people did placements for me. So I started applying for internships, but it was essentially came down to there were some accounting, I think there were 2 accounting modules. I was quite good at them. I quite enjoyed them. And so it's like, well, I'll give that a whirl, but they're a world away from what it really is. So it's bizarre how you can fall into these things, really.
Yeah. But, and you started at Grant Thornton.
Started at Grant Thornton.
Top 10 firm, obviously. I imagine it's quite a rigorous process to get into a grad scheme there.
I guess it is. But again, this is why these things are funny, especially talking about recruitment. And because I genuinely fell into it. It was it really was everyone applying for placement years. I was like, well, I've got to get an internship or something over summer. Applied for, and it was, there were like 4 bizarre schemes. One was like a sales role at Nestle or something like that. I can't remember what the others were, but it was a complete breadth. And there were just a couple of finance ones. I think one of the other big 4, Grant Thornton, and it was actually a really niche tax team that I worked in. They dual handled UK and US tax, which for anyone who knows me now, the idea of me working in something so detailed and precise is insane. And so I did really fall into it. It wasn't a kind of pre-planned thing.
Yeah. Okay, so you were at Grant Thornton for what, 3-4 years?
Yeah, so I was in the tax team for a couple of years, then did 3 years, which again, for me, that was a really, because I was in the tax team. I started doing foundation tax qualification. I would have been starting my CTA, which was a really detailed techie qualification, but also I was given an underperforming rating in my appraisal, which was one of these moments where you're like, I'm in the wrong place. I am not underperforming. And I took it very, very hard and actually had to take a backward step and a pay cut to move into audit and essentially reset and start again doing my training contract. Right. Which was a big thing at the time because everyone else is progressing really fast and you joined as this year group, because it really is like school groups in those kind of big practices. You join this year group and you're going back a year, and I was just so set on, right, I need to just open up some doors and get back into an environment where it suits me, because that just wasn't me. And then I got a kind of an overperforming rating in the audit team, not changing anything I did. It was just, you're in an environment that supports you. And then, did 3 years doing that, always knowing that it was onto something else. And then it was, okay, what next? And then the restaurant group came up. Yeah,
because like you say, they do like year intakes, don't they?
Yeah.
So you like join with a group of people. So it's quite bold to go, I need to reset, I need to start again and do something better.
Yeah, I think it's just the fact that you sometimes know, and again, it's easy to say with hindsight, because at the time I was just like, this isn't right for me, I need to do something. But in hindsight, it's very much just putting yourself in the right place where you're surrounded by the right people. And I guess I'll keep coming back to this because for me, it is all about people. And if you've got the right people around you and you enjoy what you're doing and you're interested in what you're doing, then you'll be successful. You don't need to do it the other way and focus on how to be successful. It's just do those things.
Yeah. And at what point did you qualify and therefore think, right, it's time to look for something different?
So it was kind of straight away. So it's so as soon as I qualified, I was like, I need to move, because again, I always knew that I wanted to do something more commercial. No idea what that really meant at the time.
That mean?
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just this constant thing that everyone says, I want to be more commercial. It's like, well, I guess now I finally feel like I've got a good read of what I genuinely believe that is, but it's taken me a long time to get there. But yeah, I knew the only thing that really frustrated me about practice is that it is very rigid. It's kind of doesn't matter how good you are. Once you get to the point that you're directors, partners, etc., you can really progress. And there's, if you're doing a great job bringing people in, you can earn more money and you can change the world. But when you're kind of more junior, you just have to there's an element of, doesn't matter how good you are, you're there to do a job and you can do that job as good as someone else. And I did find that really frustrating. There was no, in my eyes, I was like, well, you're telling me I'm great and you're telling me I'm really good, but I've got to wait 5 years before you're really going to do anything to show me that. So I was like, I want to get into an environment where if I'm doing a good job, I can get new opportunities and I can progress quicker. And I appreciate some big firms will be the same in terms of they're very rigid in their HR structures and they can't necessarily bend the rules. Whereas if you go, I think for me, the restaurant group is a perfect size business in the sense of you get the best of both. It's a big business that was kind of in the FTSE 250, but then it's also got the small element where it can operate like a smaller business when it wants to or needs to.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it was a move straight away.
And so Grant Thornton moved into TRG. How did you make that transition? And out of interest, did you apply to lots of jobs or were you quite fortunate?
I was very fortunate. So I was told by several people, I can't remember if you were one of them.
God.
I can't remember.
No judgment.
I was told that I would find it very difficult to get a commercial role, like an FP&A. So I went in as an FP&A manager. And I was pushed very hard. And I knew I didn't want to go into the classic kind of financial reporting. I was kind of like, I've done that. I'd done my time in tax too. So I was like, I'd done 5 years when other people had done 3. And I was very, very lucky that this role came up. Again, like I say, because it's not a big business in some respects, it was a new team. And it was very much a CV in the door, got me in the door, sorry. And then I had an interview with the head of FP&A at the time. And it was just you're great, come back. And then I had an interview with the CFO. And again, it was the same thing. So it was a very quick, and that's where sometimes it is just lucky that it comes up at the right moment. It's the right job. And for a lot of other people, they might have been waiting a lot longer. And I've had other points where I've been looking and it's been really hard to find a job or find the right one. Whereas this, for me, the hospitality side was like, this is a dream. I'm getting to move out of core finance in terms of like your financial reporting stuff. And I get to move into a business that owns pubs and owns like Wagamama and Frankie Benny's and food and drink. You're like, this is brilliant.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I agree. I think if I was in your shoes, I'd be like, whoa, how have I landed my feet
I was over the moon. It was just like, click.
How would you now describe commercial? So you referenced it earlier, whatever that meant. How would you now describe the difference? So for people in an accounting, more classic accounting job that want that experience, what are the main differences, would you say, and what does it look like?
Yeah, having said I now know what it is, I've got to have a good answer. I think from a finance specifically point of view, the way that I kind of split it now in the team that we've got is you kind of got your traditional areas of finance, which is your kind of like transactional, adding everything up, making sure the numbers are correct. Your transactional finance, your management accounts, and your financial reporting on it. You've then got, in a business like mine, like kind of you've got your operational finance. So I'd put that into commercial finance. So supporting the operational team. So we're running pubs. Are they forecasting their sales accurately? When they do an event, is it, does that event give you an uplift that you should be getting for the money you're spending on it? Are they rotoring efficiently on their kind of wages, things like that? So that's your operational finance. You've then got your like strategic finance. So your kind of like 3-year plan, 5-year plan, where are you trying to drive the business? And to me, that's what I'd kind of, and then you've got FP&A probably sitting in the middle of those things. And that's how I would describe all those 3 areas are your commercial finance. So anything that ultimately is helping the business operate directly, as opposed to just adding up where you're kind of adding up where your cash is. And I think that's the big separation, which I think a lot of people, they know that because they're interested in a business. They just can't quantify it in the way that maybe I've just said it. It's they're interested in, say, a pubs business, and they're like, yeah, but I want to work closer with a business. And it's like, what does that mean from a finance point of view? I think that's just the separation I draw. Is you're just not the back of house adding it all up. You're the
and what would you say is the most important skill and experience you develop that allows you to be successful in doing that type of job?
Good question. I think it's communication has got to be the biggest thing, because ultimately it's a very fast-paced environment, and that's the biggest difference is when you're in the financial reporting world, audit world, it's structured, it's regulated. Yeah, you do occasionally get a big shock, but it's always it's normally because something hasn't been planned properly. Like an audit should work like clockwork. Like you should be able to produce a set of management accounts in however many days every time. Like there's no reason those things shouldn't change. Whereas when you're in the commercial side, it's sales are down this week, so you've got to completely change the way you're operating. Or I don't know, you've had to shut a pub because there's been a flood. Like there's so many different things that can impact it. And I think then being able to communicate when those things are changing and keep up with the pace of it is probably the key thing that I'd say. Because no one will ever, because those things are out of your control. No one will ever tell you off or shout at you because, you know, I don't know, you messed up a forecast when something's shut. You're like, well, I didn't know it was going to close. Whereas if you don't communicate what's going on, that's where someone might get frustrated because they haven't got the information to be able to do what they need to do. So I think that's probably, and maybe a bit of prioritization as well, being able to prioritize like, okay, what was my priority last week is now completely out the window. It's gone. I've spent 2 weeks working on it, but it doesn't matter anymore because something's completely shifted.
And I guess that probably links to what we were talking about, you know, before we pressed go on this recording, was building relationships and the people side of things, right?
Absolutely.
So how would you, if there's someone listening to this thinking, how do I build relationships with operational people? What's the main advice you would give?
It's just be yourself, just be normal, just chat like it is. It's put time. I think that's the biggest mistake people make is they don't put time into it. And again, it's probably a very financy thing to do because it's hardwired into you to, you know, A plus B equals C. And that's how you're trained. All your qualifications are training you to mathematically be logical, process driven, because that's what finance adds to the business. That's what we're there to do, is give the business structure. But people then kind of, they're working through their to-do list rather than going, well, I'm going to go. So in my business, for example, it would be like go and spend a day with an operator, like just go out on site, just see what they do, like go visit some pubs, have a chat. Like when you go into the pub, just go have a chat in the kitchen, whatever it is. It's just engage and put some effort in. Because I think a lot of people probably think, they might sit there and say that, oh, you're a great communicator and you're good at talking about things. It's like, but that takes effort. It's not, it doesn't just like, yes, there are people that are more natural communicators than others, but you put time into doing that. You go, I'm going to consciously clear this day. A lot of the time when I'm in London, for example, people will say I just walk around chatting when I'm at the TRG offices, because I kind of do, but I'll clear my day. So essentially I know that I can just go around and talk to people all day. And I know that I'm not under pressure to deliver something. That doesn't then mean that I don't need to work late or early or fit it in somewhere else. Yeah. But it's putting the time into building it. And I think they'll always appreciate that.
So talk us through your career from, day one of joining TRG as a group FP&A manager to kind of where you are now.
Yeah, so it was in, like I say, kind of started in, there wasn't a group team. There was Brunning and Price was a bolt-on that was very separate, had its own finance team. So didn't really interact with TRG a huge amount, and they hadn't bought Wagamama at that time. So I was kind of working mishmash, doing a bit of group, bit of I think I was a Chiquito business partner technically for a little bit at the time, because they also owned Frankie and Benny's Chiquitos and a number of other kind of smaller brands. And it was very much working in all different areas. So it was where you were needed. That might go anything from helping out one of the transactional teams with, I don't know, reconciling the COGS or something like, cost of goods sold, food cost.
I was like,
just your beer cost.
Right, got you.
So it might be something technical. It might have been anything from that to kind of the 3-year plan for the business, the forecasting, doing all the things I guess I've already talked about, the commercial support for Chiquitos. But essentially at that point in time, it was spread very, very thin. There weren't enough of us. There wasn't an established process. So you tended to, it was more becoming a business partner to the CFO really, and the FD. You were more helping them because obviously they were the boss of the team. So when they say they want something, you drop everything and help them as opposed to helping the rest of it. So I kind of did that that must have been a couple of years. Then we kind of came up to the point of, I was looking for a more kind of commercial move, and that was the point that we must have been coming into COVID at that point, which is crazy to think about. But so at that point, I actually handed in my notice because I'd been looking, and I had like 10 different interviews. I spent a huge amount of time trying to find the role. So whereas I said the first time I fell into it, it was perfect. This time I just couldn't find anything. As I said, I wanted to be more commercial, closer to the business, because I was in the newly formed group role, as it were. Handed my notice, and essentially COVID kind of happened at the same time. They threw a lot more money at me and were like, right, look, we think you're great. We want you to stay. We don't know what we're about to go through right now, and we want to keep good people. So please just stick with us, and it was a proper kind of like, all right, fine, I'll give this a go. And that was then an insane couple of years. Whilst obviously it was horrible for a lot of people, from a my career point of view and the exposure that I got, it was a huge learning. Like the things that we did, we essentially restructured the business probably a couple of times in reality, which did mean a lot of redundancies, which is obviously really hard, but it essentially saved the business in the long run. And we did an equity raise that was like 250 million. We did a debt raise of 500 million. We did a placing. It was incredibly fast paced. So I would probably say from when I started until I took the B&P role, I didn't really have a specific job. Yeah. Like on my CV, I present it as though I've gone through 3 different stages, but in reality, it was, you were just helping where you needed to help, which again, I kind of love, and I did love about it.
Yeah.
And then I got the opportunity to move into Brunning and Price, which was a couple of years ago now.
So obviously, COVID was a really challenging time for the hospitality sector. How did you find it?
Yeah, exactly. Like for the industry, it was obviously like devastating and really hit a lot of people hard, and to the extent that a lot of people closed, and a lot of people will continue to close, where they've definitely eaten into their reserves because people that maybe had a bit of a buffer have lost that buffer. Yeah. Whereas for, I guess, me individually in that process, it did it did give me an opportunity to kind of go. I mean, I think at the start, I think it was the first. I mean, you forget. I think it was the first 6 weeks. I'm sure we had a call 7 days a week at 8:30. The 5 of us that were in this core central finance team, just because you were that responsive to what was going on, because we were shutting the business down, and we essentially pre the furlough thing had, I think it was pre-furlough, it was like a £13 million cash burn, like to pay everyone's wages. After the furlough thing, that came down to 4 or 5, but still to manage that was a huge shock. And seeing, I think one of the things that again is really interesting is most things you go through, there's always someone more senior who's been through it before. Whereas this was the first thing where everyone just kind of was like, what happened? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Because no one knew what to do.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. It was definitely something that I guess you learn a lot from, because you're kind of like, well, nothing can be as bad as that, which is quite a positive.
For sure. Moving more broadly into industry insights, how would you describe the state of hospitality in the UK at the moment?
Again, it's a really good question. I think the industry itself sometimes doesn't do itself a lot of justice. Like it's constantly, we are constantly asking for help and support on certain things, and there is a lot of the industry that's no doubt struggling, and there are a lot of people that are closing, and it tends to be small independents that are closing because again they don't have the cash reserves or big bank loans or something that they can really rely on, or the economies of scale, and that is really hard. But there are so many good news stories out there. So I think yes, it's hard and things are closing, but you can still make good money. You can still, like, I think like we're doing really well as a business. We're still growing volumes. We've still got great guest scores. Like there's other businesses out there that are the same. And in some ways, yes, things are changing, and yes, things are hard. But I do think sometimes we put a bit too much of a negative spin on it, because if you have a great concept and you do it really well, yes, you're making less money than you used to. There's no doubt about that. Just to kind of quantify the person that set up, or one of the 2 people that set up Brunning and Price pubs, has started a new chain, and they had an article out a couple of weeks ago in our like hospitality news kind of stream, and he was saying that when he started, wage cost was 20% of everything you sell, and now it's 40% in his pubs. So you're like, when you see it like that, and that's just someone who's very experienced, that's a massive hit to you know. So there's no doubt about it. It's challenged and it's adapting, and we've got to adapt, but you can still make good money and you can still grow and do really well. And I think we need a bit more of that kind of being shouted about.
Yeah, for sure. And just to give a bit more insight, where does Brunning and Price place themselves in the market and, you know, differentiate against the others that you mentioned earlier on?
Yeah, and so we're definitely like premium pub chain. I would argue we're the kind of the biggest premium pub chain out there. Like our competitor set generally is smaller than us, because as you should walk in and just go, this is a great pub. Like if you don't know us, you wouldn't walk in and go, this is a chain pub. So that has meant going into 2023, which leading up to the budget that year, there's a lot of kind of talk about kind of consumer decline and are we going to be hit and how hard, and we did budget for a volume decline. However, we went through last year with volume growth, and so generally speaking, our customers tend to be a bit older. They probably haven't got mortgages on their house, that type of person. They're retired, going out for a nice lunch on a Wednesday. And so there doesn't seem to have been a softening. This year, definitely there's been a bit of a softening, like versus, but equally we were growing at kind of, 10% plus, something like that, for the past year, because of the growth versus COVID. So actually sometimes just when you're growing at slightly lower numbers, you kind of, you feel like you should be growing at what you used to be, but you're still growing really well.
Yeah. Good success story. And so Jenna's dad used to be in pubs, and
so I know.
We've always liked the idea of, hospitality side hustle. So without giving the corporate game away, if you're looking to grow and potentially acquire new sites, what are the main things you look for as the finance head to make that sound like a good investment opportunity? So
for us, the biggest thing, which is very difficult to find at the moment, there's no doubt about it. The biggest thing is something special about your pub. So we like, a beautiful old pub or something, a pub with a view, or a pub that's on some kind of water, like whether it's a river or something that's going to drag people in and make people travel, because our pubs are drive to destination pubs. We do have some like that are walk to, but they tend to be someone's getting in the car to drive, and so you need a reason to pull people in. So I think that's the main thing. The other thing for us, and from an investment point of view, is if you want to spend a bit of money on the pub, then you tend to need to find somewhere that's probably a bit run down, or maybe had a name once upon a time and people knew it, but then it's gone downhill, and you can take it over at that point, because then it's still in people's head that it's there, and you can go, we've turned it around, and it's much better. But it's definitely difficult to get new pubs to stack up at the moment. I think lots of people are finding that. Yeah.
For anyone listening in the Peak District or knows the Peak District, there's a little village called Ashford in the Water near Bakewell.
Yeah.
My parents-in-law, they have a little sort of 2 up, 2 down in this village. Lovely little village on a river, and it's basically been derelict for 5 years. It kind of didn't survive COVID, and the owners pulled out. And then so this small business have just taken it on, massive, capital expenditure to turn it, and it's it's getting really good coverage.
There you go.
And it's that sort of thing.
Exactly.
It's like a destination, lovely little pretty Peak District village.
Yep.
So plug for the Ashford Arms.
And that's I know, I love it. That's brilliant. Like you
have to tag them.
It's because like I say, and I think it's still difficult for independents. So it's great when you hear about that kind of thing, where it's, because I think a lot of the time, if I was saying to someone who actually wanted to open a pub on their own, as me and my father-in-law are always talking about, I would kind of go, you've got to run it as a lifestyle business. You've got to really want to do it. Whereas if you're in it to go, well, I really want to grow quickly and buy a few, then you can still do that. But you've got to start to get some scale to start to make kind of real money, I think, depending on what you define as real money, I guess. But
just to cover off the industry stuff, if there's anyone listening that's thinking, I would love to get into hospitality, it sounds like an amazing industry, but I don't know much about it. What should they be doing to try and get some experience or insights that will help them?
Go to the pub.
Just go to the pub.
Go to the pub. It's
simple as that.
Yeah, it's like I genuinely think that's the best thing to do, is to go and just spend time out and about, because ultimately that's what it comes down to, is like, going back to your question about operators, just show that you understand their world. Everyone can have an opinion on, you go and sit there and you're like, that took ages for them to bring stuff to the table, or they've got loads of people just standing around in the pub, like crew, like staff, people. So you're like, well, that must be so it's just observing things and almost see it in a slightly different way. It probably for lots of my friends, this ruins like meals out, because you'll be sitting there just criticizing things that it's like, just
what's the margin they're making?
It's just like there's no way they're making money. So it's it can definitely be a bit of a killer sometimes, but it's I'd say it's getting out and about. I mean, talking to people is always going to be my advice. Like, find someone that and just have a chat, whether that's just a kind of manager of a pub because you want to get to know with how they work, or I guess any hospitality business. Because generally speaking, people in hospitality like talking and like engaging with people. So actually, like, I love it if people come and ask me questions about anything. It's just, I genuinely enjoy it, because I think the best people tend to be hospitable themselves.
From a recruitment perspective, what are the main challenges in the hospitality industry currently?
It's definitely difficult. And like I said, I'm recruiting at the moment. It's definitely really difficult at the moment to find, I guess, the right people. I think specifically the role that I'm recruiting for is a particularly difficult role, because it's a very key part to our team, and I need someone who can really work at the pace that we're working at. And I am finding it quite hard to find that kind of specific person. But on the whole, we've seen lots of good candidates that kind of are willing to move. And the only thing that has surprised me is the salary increases. I think that is fair to say. And that is difficult from an internal point of view, because you've obviously got people on certain, and I'd love to just go, you can give everyone a pay rise, but obviously you can't. But that has been the hardest thing, is that you sit there, and I think back to when I was a grad, and okay, salaries did move, but they were very, very slow. So it might be that I left at a certain time and someone left 3 or 4 years after me, and they on the same kind of salary, which I think quite often is benchmarked by the big accountancy practices. But it does feel like that's really shifted. And I think that's been the hardest part of recruiting, I'd say, from my point of view, is just that salary shock of then going to have to say to my boss to be like, oh, actually, I need another 5-10 grand or whatever it is.
Yeah.
To be honest, it's like one of the most common issues we come up against because people are trying to attract external candidates. The market has moved massively over the last couple of years in terms of salary, but that doesn't mean internally that's been the same.
Yeah.
So it's quite a sensitive subject when you're looking at long-standing members in a team that you want to retain and then going, but actually to get that same level of talent, I need to pay another 5-10 grand compared to what people are on internally. So, yeah.
And I do think I'm a massive fan in making sure that we do, you are competitive, and internally you should be looking and making sure that you're competitive against the market. Equally with internal people, they get the culture. And I do think, for example, as a business, we're a brilliant business to work for. Like, I love working this. It's a soft people business that gets things done and does it to a really high level. So I love that. And I think a lot of people would want to work for that. So sometimes you can use that.
Yeah.
But equally, no one's going to come to work for 10 grand less than they know that they can get in another job somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that's always a challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we've got a little quiz for you.
Okay, I'm terrified about this.
There are no right or wrong answers, so don't panic.
Yeah, you say that now.
But we thought it'd be quite fun to do 10 quick fire questions.
Yeah.
Half is about recruitment and hiring, and the other half are hospitality based.
Okay.
So hopefully we'll just get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, I'm terrified.
You ready?
No.
Quick answers, no time to think.
Okay.
Question number 1, Grant Thornton or BDO?
Grant Thornton.
ACCA or CIMA?
CIMA.
Potential or experience?
Potential.
Teams call or face-to-face?
Face-to-face.
Sector or skill set?
Sector.
Oh,
I got that one wrong.
Controversial.
Skill set. I need to think about these.
No, you can't
skill
think.
Set.
You can't think.
Definitely skill set.
Okay, part 2. Beer or wine?
Beer.
Pub or bar?
Pub.
Sunday carvery or gourmet burger?
Gourmet burger.
Crisps or nuts?
Both. You can't make me choose.
Pub quiz or karaoke?
Karaoke.
excellent.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Slightly surprised by that last
Maybe
one.
we can close with a rendition.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe next time when I come back. I think I'm just terrible at pub quizzes. I get bored very quickly. So I'll do the first 5, realise that I've not done anything, and then I'll just be distracting people.
That's why I have to be scribe. Because I'm actually not very good at pub quizzes. So I always have the voluntary role of scribe. So it keeps my focus and stops me being so distracting.
Hence being terrified about our mini quiz. So,
I was okay with that.
fantastic.
That was okay.
Well done.
Apart from the beer and nuts.
Yeah.
Question.
The closing question, really. I'd like to think that the audience has taken quite a lot from your insights, which have been fantastic. If you were to listen to a podcast like this, based on your experience, who would you most like to see, either that you've seen in the market or that you've worked with previously?
Good question. As in, who would I like to see
on our podcast?
on your podcast? I'm trying to think, because I'm thinking very hospitality focused. I think there would definitely be, to me, businesses like Green King would be someone that I would sit there and go, as an operator and what they do, I think they're fascinating. So hypothetically, if you could get someone on senior in that team, I genuinely think that they would be a really interesting person to talk to, because what I bring, I guess, is the premium pub chain thing, which Green King does have elements to its business that does that. But they are like, we're dwarfed by them in terms of scale, and they work in a very different way. So I think as a comparison we're very pub specific here, but a comparison for pub specific, someone within that kind of business to be able to talk about the way that they view things differently would be interesting, I guess.
Great. Yeah, we'll take that.
Right.
Excellent.
That one threw me.
Well, that's it.
Fab.
All done. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. It's very exciting.
It's been great. And I really hope that our listeners have been able to take quite a lot away from this. So that's been really helpful. For our listeners, if you have really enjoyed our conversation, we are on Spotify, Apple and YouTube. So please do hit subscribe. And otherwise, until next time, this has been Topline Talks. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.